Hello Stephen, how
Hello.
are you?
Good.
Let's talk about your amendment tomorrow. So what's the plan?
Right, so I think everyone, and I think it's important to start here, everyone is obviously still reeling from the abhorrent attacks by Hamas on the Israeli people and the Jewish state on the 7th of October, and we unequivocally condemn that, and everyone should unequivocally condemn both that and the taking hostages. But what we've seen since the 7th of October is a response from Israel, which is effectively the collective punishment of the Palestinian people. The preventing food and water and medicine and fuel getting into Gaza is collective punishment. Forcing folk off their land, out of their homes, is collective punishment. The bombing that we've seen is collective punishment. And sometimes in life you've got to stand up for your values, and we've got the opportunity in Parliament to do that as parliamentarians. So at the first opportunity, which will be tomorrow night, we're seeking to have a vote on a ceasefire. And that's because we believe in a couple of pretty simple things. We believe in international law, we believe in protecting civilians, and we believe ultimately in peace. And it's going to be for our MPs to decide whether they agree with those values or not. And we do that knowing that 76% of the public do, and we're standing up for them.
So why a ceasefire and not a humanitarian pause?
So I've been asked this question a few times, and the technocratic notion of a humanitarian pause frustrates me, because you're effectively saying, as I understand it from what's been pitched, that you'll have a 4-hour break where there'll not be any bombing, and during that period people can leave their homes, people can perhaps be given some water and some food. So after that 4 hours they're not going to be in their homes anymore, and then they're still going to be getting bombed, but just with a little bit more food in their bellies. That's not a solution, that's just continuing the problem. And I think it's pretty weak for people to come forward with that proposal rather than to say, there needs to be a cessation in violence here. We need to make sure that civilians are protected, because we've all seen the fact that babies are dying in ICU because they don't have access to the most basic thing in life, which is oxygen. It's utterly absurd. It cannot be justified in any way, shape or form. And that's why there needs to be a ceasefire. Now, what comes next after that is the important bit. The UK is a permanent member of the UN Security Council. We and all the other major nations in the world, both internationally but also regionally, need to come together and put diplomatic pressure upon Hamas to make sure the hostages are released, but also to put pressure upon Israel in relation to how they want to defeat Hamas. Because in the West, we've got a bit of experience fighting people who hide in tunnels, be that Vietnam, be that Afghanistan. And we need to understand how we actually defeat Hamas in a way which protects civilian life. And at the moment, we're not doing that.
On that line, you just used the word weak. Do you think that Keir Starmer and the Labour Party are being weak by calling for a humanitarian pause?
I do. Because, as I said earlier, if you have values and your values say that you believe in international law and you believe in the protection of civilian lives, then you should be voting on that basis. It's a pretty simple thing. And now it's been suggested, I think it was Darren Jones, one of the Labour frontbenchers, we support a ceasefire, but ultimately we don't think it's going to happen, so we're not going to vote for it. I'm sorry, that's not how politics works. Otherwise, what's the point of having a vote on half the things that happen down here? It's all about building momentum internationally. The UK does have a big voice internationally, just as France has a big voice, which is why Emmanuel Macron backs a ceasefire. It's why the UN has a big voice, and we've seen the Secretary General back a ceasefire. Even folk like David Miliband, and I didn't think I'd see this coming, David Miliband backs a ceasefire. So big players across the world back a ceasefire, and I guess the question for Keir and for Rishi is why they don't. Why are they the outliers? They're the ones who, as far as I can see it, don't believe in upholding international law and don't believe in protecting civilians.
I mean, they've been given a little bit of a free pass by Bernie Sanders when he refused to back one.
Yeah, and that was disappointing as well. But I'm sure his position and indeed Keir's position will change over time, because this is not going to get better anytime soon. Things will get worse before they get worse still. And are we just seriously saying that we're going to sit here and do nothing? We're not going to say anything. We're just going to allow civilian life to be lost, for land to be lost. And this is one of the things that sits in the back of my mind a lot, is we've obviously got a settler movement in the West Bank, which is quite forceful, proactively taking land off the Palestinian people. What confidence do we have that Benjamin Netanyahu is going to give back the parts of Gaza where the Israeli Defence Force is at this moment in time? I'm not very confident about that, and I'm not sure a lot of folk in the West Bank who are experiencing the settler movement would be confident of that either.
If you were speaking to the shadow cabinet members tomorrow who might potentially lose their job on the front bench if they are to vote with your amendment tomorrow, I mean, what would you say to them? What would your advice be?
So, you know, when I got involved in politics as a younger laddie, it was always drilled into me that make sure you can go home and look at yourself in the mirror and you can sleep at night saying you've done the right thing. And that goes back to voting on the basis of what your values are and what your principles are. Now, sometimes people disagree with those values or disagree with those principles because they hold other ones. That's fine. But if you believe in something, as I'm sure many Labour members do, and probably some Tories do as well, then vote for it. That's why you're elected to this place. You're privileged to be here and make sure your voice is heard.
Mm-hmm. Can I ask you about David Cameron? So, newly appointed Foreign Sec. I mean, he's previously described Gaza as an open-air prison. He's actually more in line with your line, arguably, than with the Labour line. Yeah,
I guess we'll not know whether he still holds that view, though, because I can't ask him that question. Nobody can ask him that question because he doesn't get to come into the House of Commons. I mean, it is utterly mental that someone who is not elected can basically be given a free pass into the House of Lords for the rest of their life to then become our spokesperson on foreign affairs across the globe. And this is the guy who brought us austerity and tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of needless deaths as a result. This is the man who gave us Brexit and all the damage that's wrought across the economy and the social fabric of the UK and our relationship with the European Union. This is the guy who was embroiled in Panama Papers scandals. This is the guy who was involved in dodgy lobbying as part of Greensill. And we're just meant to sit here and say, that's okay because he was once Prime Minister. It's fine, none of that matters. That does matter. And what matters more is the fact he's not elected. And those of us who are elected can't hold him to account. What kind of democracy is that? It's a total scam. And it goes to the heart of some of our concerns, which are very long-standing, not just about the House of Lords, but about democratic accountability in this place. And I think a lot of the public will be looking on just pretty confused as to how he's managed to find himself back in that position.
It does feel like he was parachuted in and Holak approved his peerage pretty quickly. I mean, what do you think that says about process?
I mean, I'm not sure where process starts and where it finishes in Westminster sometimes. You see some pretty bizarre decisions. We've seen some people put in the House of Lords on the whim of a Prime Minister who was pretty hopeless, and we're still waiting to see what Liz Truss ultimately comes forward with in relation to her options for the House of Lords. The system that we have here clearly doesn't work. It's clearly not democratic if someone can just waltz into one of the biggest jobs in the UK. And see, if I was a Tory MP, of which there is still quite a few of them, I'd be sitting there a little bit embarrassed that they had to go and rake around in their past to find someone to do a job which they're obviously not capable of doing.
Do you think that the cabinet, as is presented now, you've got Etonians back in there? I don't even know the words for it. The Charterhouse, I think, is the other public school that's represented. Maybe Winchester. Do you think that is a good representation of the UK public?
No. The fact I've not heard of at least one of those.
I learned it this morning.
Yeah, it's probably reflective of most folk in society. I think all of us like to look at our politicians and see ourselves reflected in them, and now that means that you have to have folk who are from all different ages and backgrounds, religions and ethnicity. And I'm not sure the cabinet reflects that anymore. It's back to the middle-aged bloke, isn't it, in charge of the highest offices in the UK. But I guess that's just the same old Tories. That's what we expect.
So it's not the cabinet that will save Rishi Sunak?
No, I think that ship has perhaps sailed, and you hear the term rearranging the seats on the deck chairs on the Titanic. It's probably at the point where the Titanic sank and they're just trying to put things back together, which ain't happening. Yeah, I mean, the Tories have been busted in Scotland since the 1950s, and the chances are the same things will happen in England next year.